Poker's legendary champions, next-generation stars, and tireless ambassadors of the game, sharing their wisdom and guiding your journey to high achievement on the green felt. This is Tactical Tuesday on Chasing Poker Greatness with your host, Brad Wilson.
Welcome to this week's episode of Tactical Tuesday. John, you always say we'll see you next week, and this week has arrived. How you doing, sir?
Pretty good. How you doing, Brad?
I'm doing quite well. Just sitting here looking identical to the way that I looked in last week's episode. It's strange.
We're both wearing the same clothes. Oh, wait, I got
it. Yeah, we dressed up just like we like continuity on Tactical Tuesdays. So
Halloween.
Halloween. We're just looking the same. That's our Halloween costume. So what's the theme of this week's episode? I don't even know.
Yeah, so not last week, but a couple weeks ago, we did an episode on sizing river bluffs and kind of the considerations that we think about before bluffing the river and deciding what size to go. We had a hand where we showed a really small bluff, a spot where we thought going really small was appropriate, and then another spot where we thought overbetting the river was appropriate. So we're gonna flip the script a little bit here, and instead of sizing bluffs, we decided to do an episode on a couple of hands where I thought there was some interesting discussion to be had about sizing value bets or value hands. So yeah, we'll just jump right into that.
Yes. Here. This is a Max Greed episode.
Yeah.
All right. So break down hand number one for the podcast listener.
Yeah. So I'm in the cutoff. I open King Jack offsuit. The button who is a fish flats, the button who is a rag flats, and the big blind who is a fish also calls. So we go three ways to flop.
Can we talk about pre-flop?
Yeah, just to talk about pre-flop real quick. I think the button is going to have a slightly wider flatting range than normal, given that we have a fish in the big blind, who's also, really, really deep. I guess not too deep with the button, but still 150 big blinds deep. So I think the button will be flatting wider than normal. I also think that they might be deciding to flat some hands that might normally be a 3-bet cutoff versus button. I think there definitely is a category of hands where it's probably more profitable to just flat and hope that the fish in the big blind comes along and not take some small pre-flop edge that you have against the cutoff. I think there's some hands that are, become really nice flats. There's some middling suited gappers, a hand like Jack 9 suited. I think some of the smaller and middling pocket pairs, you can now start flatting wider with and hoping that the big blind just comes along. So I expect basically, in short, I expect the button to have a pretty wide flatting range, given that there's a fish in that big blind.
In short.
Yeah.
What's funny is, so there's a thing that you never wanted to hear me say again. So I'm not going to say it. So I'll just leave that to you as to other options that may have been available to us.
I won't say it. I'll just let you see the rest of this hand. How about that? Yeah. Maybe that'll save me.
I'll say it. If you won't say it, I'm going to say you got a fish in the big blind. You can size up pre-flop. We can raise larger with the fish in the big blind. I think it's extremely important to build bigger pots against fish when they're out of position and they just make some catastrophic mistakes. Starting a pot with 8 big blinds versus starting a pot with 4 big blinds or 5 big blinds is a major difference by the time that it gets down to the river. And yeah, so I would open wider exploitatively versus this fish in the big blind.
Yeah. So just for the listeners, how big would you open in this spot?
4x probably.
40. Yeah. I think that's reasonable.
And I think if the button 3 bets, so be it. We just have a pretty easy fold with King Jack off.
Yeah. Yeah. And like I said, the button, this probably has a lot to do with why you'd open so large. But like I said, the button is probably not as incentivized to 3-bet, given that they also want to play with the fish.
What again, I always say, what can they do, right? They know we're opening larger. They know there's a fish in the big blind. Okay, but I'm opening larger because I want more money to be in the pot, which means I can have a stronger range. And so yeah, it's basically their hands are kind of tight. If you're on the button here, you just have to open bigger. I mean, fish,
Yeah.
like when fish fold incorrectly, that's worth more money to us. When they call incorrectly, that's worth more money to us. It's just like building bigger pots in position versus fish is worth way more money to us. And so we got to start pre-flop.
Yeah. Okay. Yeah, that was a mistake by me. It's old habits showing up again.
They die hard. They die hard. Yeah,
We
so
go 3 ways to this flop. Yeah.
3 ways. What's
Ace
a
of
flop?
hearts, king of diamonds, 8 of diamonds. I have king jack offsuit, king of hearts, jack of spades. The big blind checks. I check this flop, and the button decides to stab for I think what is actually around half pot once you take out the rake. So goes for a half pot stab. I call with second pair. I think there's a lot, I mean, already here, and then once we get to the turn, but like I think we could definitely have like a pretty long conversation about like my range construction in these multi-way spots. I don't have like a clear roadmap of like exactly what my flatting range and continuing range looks like and where the weaknesses are, but it sort of feels like in this hand that I'm opening myself up to I don't know, some downstream problems with how I'm constructing my range multi-way.
I think the more important takeaway here is, I mean, first of all, yes, I think you are too, because I think you bet like all of your good hands with the fish in the big blind. And so like when you check call, you almost exclusively have like second pair, or maybe like ace deuce or ace tray or ace four or ace five. I mean, maybe that's enough. But I think the bigger takeaway is like when you're the button in these spots and like a reg check calls on a board like this, I think that just allows us to bluff them if we do have bottom of range stabs on the flop pretty successfully on like turns and rivers. If we bet our like gut shots like jack 10, queen jack, queen 10, then I think it's just a license to go bet.
Just go crazy.
Yeah.
Okay. Yeah, I think given what my checking range looks like, especially with a fish, like I'd be just so tempted to just bet, all my strong hands or even like reasonably strong hands, like even ace deuce with the fish in the hand. I think I'd be pretty excited about just putting money in on the flop.
I would check ace deuce. I would check ace deuce. Like it's hard to get 3 streets from a worse hand with ace deuce.
Yeah. Okay. I mean, that's I guess like the ace rag, the suited ace rags. Like maybe I find the check, but I don't know. Versus the button or versus the fish in the big blind, I just
I know.
I get overly excited.
Super pumped. So
that just leaves my check call range, like you said, just like wide open for, just bombing into it with the bluffs and stuff like that. So yeah, I don't know, like what's the fix for that? Is like check more on the swap, I guess, multi-way, maybe check range. That's not crazy. It's just that like ace king X type flops seem like the ones that are most reasonable to build a betting range on.
I don't think there is a fix that makes sense in this configuration, because you want to bet with your good hands versus the fish. I mean, you could just bet a third with range. I think
that might be it.
That's the fix. Like if you're going to do anything, just bet a third with range. Yeah. But I don't mind exploitatively like splitting your range with some checks and bets again with the fish in here. Cause I think like the button's not going to, I think the button is sort of in a similar situation where like they're not pumped to just bomb off 3 ways with this fish involved. If the fish is sort of like this, I used to call them like meat shields in the middle, right? Where like, they just make it tough for everybody.
Okay. All right. Yeah. Right. So what you're saying is like if the button has queen jack and gets called by the fish, they're not like super excited about like trying to get the fish off of ace deuce or something like that. Whereas, I likely fold those hands sometimes and maybe I don't even check them. So
yeah, they're trying to fold out 2 people as like a collective unit. And that just makes me think that they're not going to be over bluffing. And if they're not over bluffing, then they're not going to be able to exploit our downstream range construction problems.
Gotcha. Okay. So we go ahead and call, and just like the best turn ever feels, it's the king of clubs on the turn. So I turn trips. The board is ace, king, 8, king. I check again, and the button that's pretty big, about 2/3 pot.
bad. I think we just talked about what your range likely is. I wouldn't be pumped like facing this turn bet. I would be a little bit petrified. It is a good card, but like this is a card that is like most of what we have, and villains going polar and sizing up on the turn is like,
Yeah. Like it just looks like I have a king, and you don't care that like the king paired on the turn. Like, well, like, yeah, I agree. Like I'm super excited to see the king once it peels, but then once I check and the button bets this size, suddenly I'm not as excited about my hand anymore.
Yeah. The good news is like we beat some like worse kings, so king 10, king 9 suited, something like that, king 10 off. Or I don't think they have king 10 off pre-flop, but
and also like just some more good news. They never have aces. They never have ace king. So
yeah. So if anything, you should just be using your blocker here and just check raising and piling everywhere. Fold out their entire range.
Do you think there's a spot where you would check raise bluffs, but maybe not check raise a king? Maybe, I don't know.
No, I wouldn't check. Like I would just, your hand wants to call. I'm joking because we always talk about you trying to turn your trips into bluffs.
No, I got to save that for the river when I'm sure that my trip kings were no good, like on the 7 of diamonds river or something.
Yeah, that's when. It's probably not the worst, honestly. Like on a 7 of diamonds, check raising all in. I holy shit! Like if I had like eights
getting you
full,
on board.
I mean, if I had eights full, I'm like, oh my god, like what do I beat? Like, I mean, what do you beat with eights full when you get like check jammed on?
Yeah,
you beat.
We're a flush or whatever. Yeah,
yeah. You beat villain turning king X into a bluff, which, whew, you get a pretty good.
Oh, thank God I don't have to do that.
Yeah,
it was the right diamond. It wasn't the 7 of diamonds.
Yeah, we don't have to think about very much here on the river. You get the jack of diamonds. So the final board is ace, king, king, 8, jack. So Jon has kings full of jacks. The river completes the front door flush.
Yeah. So I check again. Kind of just playing in flow, I guess. And the dealer or the button, I believe, puts out a bet on the river. 168.08 into 340. So I think that comes out to like half pot without rake.
Sure.
Maybe a little bit more than half pot. Yeah, I mean, it's kind of a great river card for me. Like his bluffs, now the button's bluffs have hopefully improved into flushes quite frequently, and we beat all the worst king X that might be value betting this size. And if he has queen 10, then we beat that too.
I wonder if villain has multiple sizings on the river than half pot. It's curious to me.
They have to have more than this one size on the river.
I
doubt they bluff half pot on the river.
Well, I think with like eights full, I think they bet bigger.
Yeah.
With
like eights full, king 8, king jack, like those hands.
I just think they use a bigger size than half pot. Maybe they do some frequency, but I would just have to think that they have multiple different sizing selections here. I don't think they're bluffing. I mean, I think that like you would have to be just suicidal to bluff on like when the king pairs and then the front door flush completes. Like that's an insane card to bluff on. So I think that like they have good hands here. It's just a matter of like what good hands do they have. The most obvious boat that they have, I think, is eights full. But I think eights full likely chooses a larger sizing on the river once the flush completes. So I don't think they really have eights full here, which, segues nicely into your sizing choice here on the river when you check raise with your value.
Yeah. So again, just this is going to be a spot where like I'm splitting my own sizes exploitatively. If I had a bluff or like had a hand that I wanted to bluff on the river facing this river bet, I would 1000% just be jamming all of those bluffs. I don't think I would ever pick a different size other than jam.
What hand would you bluff with?
That's so hard. I mean, that was a question that I was gonna like just kind of pose like after my sizing came out, but it's just like I don't even know what my bluffs are in this situation. Like what hands I would have to turn into a bluff. Like it might just be a king that doesn't that didn't boat.
I think it has to be.
Yeah, it has to just be like my king, queen, king 10, king 9, like whatever that didn't boat. And like now the flush gets there and I feel like I don't beat anything. And this guy's clearly value betting.
Maybe like an ace deuce if you call the turn. I don't know.
I would rather pick a king than ace deuce.
I mean, I'd rather have an 8. Like that's the one that I very much want to have would be an 8, but I don't think we have any 8s that check call.
Yeah, that's a good point.
Yeah, I can't think of a hand. I mean, king queen with the queen of diamonds, king 10 with the 10 of diamonds. Maybe those are the ones.
Yeah. I think this is actually a really good conversation because like I had this thought in game as well. I was just like, I don't know what my bluffs are. Like more importantly, like I don't know what my bluffs are going to be perceived to be by my opponent. Like if I do jam here, what is he going to think that like he beats again? Like what is he going to think that he beats like when he has 8s? Because like there are no natural bluffs. It looks like such a good board for the pre-flop raiser. Like I think they're going to start having thoughts about like, oh wow, like did this guy just trap with aces or kings or ace king? Like those kinds of thoughts. More than they are like they're gonna have those thoughts more often than they are like, okay, well let me like squeeze my brain to think about like what their reasonable bluff combos in the spot are. And I think when you find yourself on the river with a value hand, kind of asking yourself like, okay, like I do want to jam this hand for value, but like what, like I just can't think of like what my bluffs would be in the spot. And like on top of that, like I can't imagine what my opponent will think my bluffs will be. Like I think that's a good spot to like size down on your raises or your sizing when like you yourself are struggling to come up with your own bluffs.
I think it goes back to sort of the importance of, you know, when we talk about this a lot, how you tend to overfold in spots like earlier in the tree.
Mm-hmm.
And I think what happens when you overfold in spots earlier in the tree is that you don't give yourself the opportunity to have bluffs in spots like this.
Yeah.
Because like you fold too much on the turn, right?
Yeah.
Which means you just don't have enough available combos to really carve out a bluffing range. And I mean, for everybody that says like poker's dead, I would just say, look at this hand as an example of why I think poker, until the robots take over, poker won't be dead, because you don't have any bluffs here. But I would also expect Villain to snap.
Wait, you're saying like me personally, I don't have bluffs here?
Yeah, I don't think you have bluffs here. And I think
yeah, we had a technical Tuesday where I jammed the queen jack.
I think you're going to struggle. I mean, maybe. I think, well, okay, so I know the result of this hand, right? And that biases me a little bit because the result of this hand will influence what I'm saying right now. But what I'm saying is, like, if Villain has 8s, even though you don't have natural bluffs or you don't have bluffs, I don't think they fold 8s to a jam.
I see.
I think they just snap call because they have a full house. And that's why I think poker is profitable until the robots take over, because human beings, despite knowing you don't have any bluffs, just call in spots where they shouldn't, just because they have a full house, right? So, yeah, I mean, and, you know, that sort of, I guess, yeah, tell us about why you choose the sizing that you choose, because you do go small. And my assumption is that you're choosing it just because you have no bluffs, and that's the reason why you choose a small sizing.
Well, I think like thinking about like what my own bluffs would be is like a starting point, but I don't think that's like a particularly good place to like end your, you know, your thoughts on like how you should size. Because like you said, like, let's say I know that I have lots of bluffs here and I check jam, like whatever, a bluff or value. Like you said, like the 8s are just going to call because they're not going to know. They just look at their house and they look at their hand and they say like, I have a full house. And, you know, they probably like don't spend a ton of time like thinking about like what bluffs I have. But like, so I think like what's most important, well, I'm sort of killing my own argument here, but I think like what's important is to like first think about like how many bluffs you have in reality for yourself. And then like kind of the last layer of that is like, okay, like of these bluffs, like how many is my opponent going to think that I actually get to the river with? Because if you're not perceived to have bluffs. It doesn't matter whether you actually have them or not. Like your opponent is not gonna get a chance to like ask you, like give you a truth serum and be like, okay, well, tell me how many do you actually like have bluffs on this spot or not. They're just gonna take what their perception is and act on that. So anyways, like that's kind of a long-winded way to say that. Like I thought that like I personally don't have a lot of bluffs here, and that my opponent would just like really, really struggle to find hands that I might be bluffing on the river.
Yeah, you're not
given
bluffing.
that in reality I don't have time.
I think you're just not bluffing. I think that like the truth and reality of the situation here is that most humans have no bluffs here when they raise the river. And it's not like the way that this hand played out, it's not it's not that confusing to see. Like you check called the flop because there's a fish and it's multi-way. I mean, this is like a rare occurrence of a situation. And I just think that like, yeah, you king, queen, and king 10 with a diamond are like your only possible available bluffs.
I wouldn't even care if I had a diamond. Like I'm repping a boat. It's like, what? I don't care if you have a flush.
Yeah. Well, okay. So
yeah. Anyways,
king, queen, king, jack. King
honestly, I'm taking some offense to the fact that you think I have no bluffs in this spot, because I would like to think that I do.
You would like to think.
Dude, I don't know what else I have to do. And then I ripped the queen jack in the other hand. Just that's probably a spot where like if I had a boat there, you might win. You don't think that you might be like, well, you don't have any bluffs when you bet through this river.
That's true. Like you do rip trips, and I think this is like the perfect situation where you have to turn your trips into a bluff, and those are the only available bluffs that you have. No. I think it becomes problematic when you jam like all your king X, because then you have too many bluffs. But anyway, that's a different conversation for a different day. You do choose this like small sizing. Villain does call. They call with a hand that, you know, makes sense given the way that the hand played out. But again, like, did they snap call? Did they think about it?
Yeah, they thought about it for a little while and then called. I don't think they like, it wasn't an egregious time bank or anything like that, but it was not a snap.
Yeah, because like they've got a queen and a 10 and the two diamonds. Like from their perspective, it's very hard coming up with hands that they beat.
Yeah, but they call anyways.
But they call anyway, right? Because like that's because humans, despite knowing what they should do, they just call, and so like that's why poker stays good.
So like in my opinion, sort of like the operative question in this situation is like, do you think I should have jammed anyways, given that like we just think they call with pocket eights, like they just shrug and call with pocket eights without, Well,
I don't think they
like,
have
am I getting
eights here. I think the sizing they chose leads me to believe they don't have eights.
Okay.
And that's
if they went bigger, jamming would be, you think it's more reasonable?
I would jam and be like, I don't have bluffs here, but I don't think you're folding. And like that's But I hate the way, like, I don't love their turn bet. I think their turn bet is just not good. What are they doing?
What are you saying? Like they should check range on the turn? If you're going to have a bluff on the turn, like this is pretty good as far as they go. If you're like, okay, I'm only betting the turn with king X plus and some bluffs, this is one of the ones that I would be like, yep, this is some bluffs.
I wouldn't bluff the turn. I would bet like eights full and nothing else. I mean, when you check call the flop, you've got so much king X in your range. Like that is what your whole range basically looks like. So like lots of different turn cards, I'm down with betting. This specific turn card, I don't think you should be betting on this turn card.
Okay.
All right. So another long-winded hand number 1. Stick around after the break. What's the theme of this episode?
Picking value sizings.
Value sizings. Yeah. Pick good ones.
We don't even know what we're talking about.
It's been a long day. We had to find the same wardrobe as last week.
Oh,
it's
that
tough.
took a while.
Yeah.
Before I got Nuffle, I had run into a lot of donk bets. And I think once you play a certain amount of hands, there's something wrong with our opponent's strategies, but you don't know how to play to maximize EV against it. And it's very frustrating. I looked at the document and I couldn't believe that I paid money for it. I actually doubted that it could provide value because it was so brief. But since then, it's repaid me just over and over and over again. And it's one of the most consistent money makers built into my strategy that sheds light on just how bad your opponents are. And it took me 20 minutes to perfect it. And it's just amazing. Yeah, I'm speechless. It's just that good. The simplicity of it is part of it being a masterpiece.
Welcome back to this episode on choosing the greediest of all the greediest value bet sizings here on Tactical Tuesday. This next hand, John, let's jump straight into it because my wife just made tacos. They smell really nice, and
Oh man,
it's been a long day.
all right. Let's get through this hand. I'm on the button, ace 9 offsuit, ace of hearts, 9 of diamonds. The suits do not end up mattering in this hand. I open, and the big blind calls. The big blind seems like I don't know how to describe him, like a tight fish, maybe. He's playing 15-4 over 90 hands.
15-4. Woo.
Yeah.
How
6% 3-bet.
How much are you widening your button opening range versus a 15-4 in the big blind?
I don't know. I'm honestly like I'm a little terrified of these like 15-4s, like 8-9. I'm like, dude, what if I end up playing a big pot against these guys? Like that could just like be disastrous.
Man, I'm like opening most like 70%, 80% of range on the button versus this nit.
Yeah.
But they defend and you flop pretty good.
Yeah. Although against the 15-4, I'm like, is this good or am I am I in trouble here? I don't know who's in trouble. Someone's in trouble.
Well, the flop is an ace tray. There's $55 in the pot. Mr. Knitfish guy checks. John goes ahead and bets a third.
Yeah, gonna be doing this with range on this flop. Not too much to talk about, I think. And the big blind calls, and we see the best turn in the whole deck. It is the 9 of hearts, so we make nuts. The big blind checks. Man, I think there's like a lot of stuff we could talk about when it comes to sizing on this turn. Like I just did a really standard 2/3 turn bet, but I think I could have been way more. Like I think I could have put way more thought into it, especially given like what we know about the big blind.
I think I would go one of two ways. I would go 30%, or I would go like 150%. And I wouldn't do anything in between.
I think that is probably the right way to go. And yeah, with the boat, I'd be like really tempted to do the 150 and just try to just pile money in with his ace X and like maybe even get like a river jam or something like that. But
well, I mean, you're polarizing with 70%, but I think that if you go 150%, he's going to continue his ace X no matter like what we do. Like
right.
The reason why I think like 30% is an option is if they can like inappropriately raise an ace X on the turn. That'd be pretty money too. Getting an extra bet in.
Oh, okay. I thought the 30% was like so that we can target a wider value range from him, like pocket 8s and 7s and 6s, maybe like feel like they can't fold, versus 30%.
People tend to raise like at almost double frequency versus the small sizing compared to like the big sizing. And so
you
like
still be like hopeful of that versus a nit?
I mean, I'm always hopeful that they can like overplay an ace. You know, facing a small sizing. I mean, there's no real reason for them to to think that. I mean, it is like in the profile of like a nitty fish that they're going to overplay trips inappropriately.
Oh, ace 5 needs protection. Like I'm gonna pile the money in.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah. In that lens, like this size is fucking terrible because it's just like it doesn't open the door to like let them overplay. It doesn't like get the extra value from the top end of hands. All it does is get like minimum value from their top end of hands and folds out or like
folds out
and
the
then minimum
8s
value
and the 7s and
and then like doesn't get the check raise, doesn't open the door for the check raise opportunity and let them overplay like ace deuce through ace, whatever.
Yeah. If you're gonna polarize like with the nuts here, you gotta just target like the top of their range and go super big.
Yeah. I think I knew that, to be honest. I was like, I knew that, and like, it's just, I don't know. I was just like scared and like scared of blowing him off a hand or something, and just decided to go with my.
Well, they do fold more often, but the times they call, it's a lot more valuable.
Worth a lot. Yeah. So I go with this very poor size and get called. The river is the queen of spades, so the board is now ace, ace, 3, 9, queen. I have ace 9. I still think it's the nuts. Like this guy's like really tight, but I would still expect ace queen. I was still expecting ace queen to 3-bet pre-flop all the time. Ace queen offsuit, ace queen suited. Maybe that's incorrect, but that's what I thought. And the big blind actually leads the river for $110. So just around half pot, or just over half pot on the queen of spades. I'm not at all worried, like I said, about him improving to a hand that beats ours. It's just kind of a matter of what are my how large does my hand want to size when I raise. I don't know. Anything else that you're thinking about before
No, I think that's pretty much it. Like, what's our appropriate value sizing here? Just kind of like going back like to the turn. I mean, if you size to like 120, then there's 240, 300 in the pot compared to 200. And I don't know if they decide to lead like half pot here, but if they did, that would be like a significant, much larger pot if they donked. And even if they don't donk, you can actually just overbet the river as well, targeting their ace X. Like, so you can, like, there's 300 in the river, like you can just bet 450 or whatever and expect to still get paid off by ace X.
Yeah, that's a good point. I'm just honestly really embarrassed with my turn sizing now that we've spent 5 minutes talking about it. It's just so bad. It's so terrible. Like, it doesn't accomplishes like the minimum of like
it's like it's just like the worst of both worlds, I think.
Yeah.
If you just got to go for it, and like, yeah, villains are going to fold a lot, but when you do hit the situation, it's much better to bet, much bigger.
Right. Yeah,
so they bet 110. And so the way that I would think about this is, again, I don't know, like in the last hand, we talked about villain having potentially having like a spectrum of sizes. I'm totally biased because I know what they have. I just don't think this feels like a boat. Like, I think it feels a lot like ace X. And I don't think like the ultra greed, the all-in button, I would be very afraid of blowing them off ace X by just ripping it.
What size would you expect boats to lead for if they do lead? Or are you saying that like boats don't lead?
I think so. Boats have the option to check raise the flop and the turn. They pass up both of them. I think they would lead like pot. Villains tend to like scale linearly to the strength of their hand. So I would think like boats are going to lead pot typically, and probably check raise the flop or the turn. So it just doesn't leave a lot of boats in their range when they choose half pot, in my opinion.
Okay. Yeah. It's giving villain a lot of credit for being able to not check raise pocket 3s or pocket 9s or ace 3 on some earlier street, given that like those hands do benefit from some protection as well. And
they're choosing a weird sizing. They're this is a weird line, they like it's sort of, this ties into like last week's Tactical Tuesday for the podcast listener, where villains choose this strange line. And what are like the most natural and easy hands for villain to choose this line with? Good ones, pretty much.
Yeah. Okay, so then, we should just do this from your perspective. Like, what size would you pick in this river situation?
Pretty much the exact size that you chose.
Okay, just roughly 3x it and give him like a great price to call with whatever hand you bet on the river.
Pretty much. I mean, maybe you can go like 389 or 396 or like something bigger. Yeah. I think that's probably reasonable to go a little bit bigger. But yeah, I'm not like piling. I just think their boats are likely to take different actions, and it wouldn't surprise me if we just like piled and folded out like ace jack, ace 10, ace 8, right, ace 7, ace 6, ace 5.
Right. That's kind of a key part of this analysis, is that like their non-boat aces are going to fold. The non-boat aces that don't 3-bet pre-flop are all going to fold to the jam.
Well, we suspect, especially they're playing like 15/6. You know, they are wary of putting money in the pot.
Yeah. Oh, it's tough to know like how to. I mean, like they're wary of putting money in the pot, so then when they like do put money in, like on the river, should I be more excited about like jamming this or not? But anyways, yeah, I mean, for a lot of the reasons that you touched on, like I picked like a really small raise size in a spot where like if I was bluffing the river, this is a spot where it's tough to find bluffs, by the way. Not the other one. This I don't think I would ever raise to any other size than all in if I was bluffing. So yeah, another spot where I think it's again where like I'm like Brad said, it's going to be tough for me to find bluffs, and my opponent is probably not going to perceive me to have very many bluffs. And I think in those spots, even though it's really tempting to jam a hand like ace nine or king jack in the other hand, yeah, I think it's like really important to have like some extra discipline in these spots and not try to go for it all, even though that's what I really wanted to do.
Yeah, and we give Villain lots of credit for perceiving the bluffs. I think like their perception of things are just like, oh, they raised an amount that I can call with my ace. Cool. Or wow, they're putting a lot of money in this pot. I think I should just fold.
This hand can't. Yeah.
This hand can't be good.
You don't think they're looking at like bricked flush draws and like, oh well, like they can have this and that hand that clearly would take the slide and would want to raise the river as a bluff. You don't think they're thinking about that stuff? They're just like the absolute value of their hand plus the amount of money that's going in is like what they care about. Yeah.
Yes. 100%. I think that's what they care about.
Yeah, I agree. Which is why I size smaller with my value and go massive with my bluffs.
You'd be a fool not to. Like you'd be a fool not to exploit that type of villain. Yeah. So yeah, I'm down with the river sizing. Villain calls. They have the ace jack suited. So it's a hand that like I guess makes sense given the situation.
I think I should have been more afraid of the queen than I was, given that this guy does not 3-bet ace jack suited big blind versus button. I mean, you probably could just show up with ace queen offsuit, maybe even ace queen suited, and like, and I just like get my world destroyed. Like if the river was a jack, I think I would have similarly just been like, well, this guy he definitely 3-bets all his ace jack suited, like probably 3-bets most of his ace jack offsuit. Like I shouldn't be too worried about a jack.
I mean, you'd have got crushed, like, but whatever. That's just a small percentage of the amount of ace X that they have. So like it is what it is. I think you are right though. I think they do have ace queen off in their range. Like
yeah, for sure.
But yeah, it's another Tactical Tuesday in the books. You are now going to go to Vegas, play some live cash. Right now. Oh, you're in Vegas right now. I forgot. Yeah, you're in Vegas right now. How's the live cash coming? How's it treating you?
Oh, it's been going pretty good so far. That action's been great. That was a joke. We're pre-recording this a week in advance, but by the time this airs, I will be in Vegas playing live cash. So I don't know. Maybe the week after, I'll have some cool hands from the live streets to bring in for Tactical Tuesday. It's been a while actually since I've brought in a live hand. It's been a really long time.
It has, and maybe one of these days we'll get a studio set up in Vegas. We'll have some like Tactical Tuesday on the road.
Oh, on the road
at the Rio.
Yeah. Get a van or like a tour bus. Like
yeah, touring Tactical Tuesday. Well, one thing left to say.
See you next week.
Thanks for listening to Chasing Poker Greatness. You can subscribe on Apple Podcasts or on your favorite podcast app. Go to chasingpokergreatness.com to get the newsletter, join the Greatness Village community, book a coaching session, or dive into the latest data-driven poker courses. Follow the show on Twitter @CPG Podcast.